Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Zach Kennedy, home marketing specialist and realtor in Birmingham, Alabama. And in this video, I would like to explain how agent compensation works. There was recently, you may have seen in the headlines, a lawsuit filed in the state of Missouri called the Sitzer-Burnett trial. And there were plaintiffs got with attorneys and sued the National Association of Realtors and some select real estate brokerages over agent compensation and some confusion there. And so as a result, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, and certain MLSs or multiple listing services, this is where we put properties in the MLS and it shoots out to Zillow and Realtor.com and all that. As a result of the lawsuit, NAR and the MLSs and some real estate companies have implemented changes that will affect you greatly as you buy and sell in the future. And so I just kind of wanted to do a video where it's going to be very informal and we're going to talk about how agent compensation works now as a result of this lawsuit. The changes were implemented on August the 17th. And so first let me start with how real estate compensation worked prior to the changes that have taken place. So let's say you are selling your home, okay? Maybe you've sold a home, maybe you're thinking about selling your home. Well, in the old way, you sat down with a listing agent, okay? An agent is an independent contractor with a listing or a real estate brokerage, okay? So brokerage, agent. So you sat down with a listing agent, a representative of the broker, and you may have agreed to hire that agent to list your home, okay? And you agreed on a fee for that agent to list your home. Now, the compensation, the commission, all that has always been negotiable. It will always be negotiable, okay? But the market has kind of decided a range around what listing agents typically list the house for, what buyers agents typically make. There are no set fees. I want to be very clear on that. And it's completely negotiable all the time. If the listing agent you meet with or have met with has a fee, you have the opportunity to negotiate on that fee. And if you come to an agreement, wonderful, everybody signs the listing agreement, everybody's very clear on where the money's going. Or you don't come to an agreement on the fee, maybe it's too high for what you think that agent is capable of doing, well, you have the right as the seller to go hire another real estate agent, okay? And that agent has the right to not work with you, to wish you the best of luck, but maybe they have a fee that, look, this is my fee, this is my value, this is what I'm willing to do this job for, we can't come to an agreement, I wish you luck, I'm gonna walk, okay? So that's how that works. Now, prior to the changes, the flow of money, basically the way that this has worked, is you sat down with a listing agent, and let's just say for an easy example, you listed the house at 6%, okay, 6%. Now, how that worked is that the seller had an agreement with the listing brokerage, let's just call it 6%, and there was a cooperative agreement in the MLS, the multiple listing service that agents were a part of, where listing agents collected that fee up front and then shared a portion of that fee with an agent that brought the buyer, a buyer's agent, or that brokerage, okay? So let's just call it 6%. Let's just keep it easy. So what would happen is the seller would pay the listing brokerage that 6% fee, 6% of the sales price, the final sales price of the house. And so seller pays 6% to listing brokerage pays listing agent 3%, pays buyer agent, buyer brokerage 3%. Those fees for listing and buyer agent were coupled, okay? And this lawsuit was alleging that not only do agents get paid too much, which is insane, but that there was no like the fee was just publicized in MLS and there was no negotiating on the back end of that fee. So there was accusations of price fixing. There were accusations that buyers had no negotiating power for that agent's payment. And so now as a result of the changes, the big key word to keep in mind is decoupling. The buyer's agent and the listing agent's commissions being coupled previously have now been decoupled. Okay, so now there will be no exact, there will be no listing agent signing off on a buyer agent commission compensation. The buyers will have to have an agreement with their own agent on that buyer's agent compensation. Okay, I'll tease that out here in a second, but basically from now on, when you're selling your house and you want to hire an agent, remember, you don't have to, you can try doing it yourself. If you sit down with a listing agent, you are going to agree on a fee between you, the seller, and that listing agent specifically. Okay, now the way that money is going to flow is from the seller to the listing agent, rather than the seller to the listing brokerage and then split between listing agent and buyer agent. So now, again, this is very important. Buyers, if you are wanting to go and search for homes and you want to hire a real estate agent, you are going to have to sign a buyer agency agreement with that agent before you can actually go and look at a home, before you cross the threshold. Okay, so if you are on Zillow or Realtor.com, or you're calling your favorite agent because you want to go see a house, they have to have, by law now, they have to have a buyer agency agreement with you. Let me show you a buyer's agent agreement so you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. All right, so we're here in my DocuSign. This is a buyer agency agreement. We'll start with the buyers here. So you sit down, either you sit down or you sign this on the card. What I would recommend is, before you ever go look at homes, find an agent that can help you and that you trust and that is competent and knows what they're doing and does it a lot, and have a buyer consultation. Okay, sit down with that agent, explain what you're looking for, and allow that agent to explain their value and how they can help you. Okay, so this is what that buyer agent is going to look at. Property desired, this could be a specific property if you only want to go look at one property. There's going to be a duration of the agency agreement. There's going to be broker compensation. So now, remember, the seller and the listing agent used to agree on a fee, let's call it 5 or 6%, and then that fee was split between listing agent and buyer agent. That is going away. Those fees are decoupled. So you need to have an agreement with a buyer's agent on compensation. Does that sound scary? Yes. Does that mean that every buyer is now going to have to save up for a down payment and closing costs and to pay their agent? In some scenarios, maybe you will, but that'll just depend on if you're able to negotiate that or not in your contracts, in your offers. Okay, so you need to be prepared to pay an agent, but that agent will tell you the vast majority of the time, okay, a seller is only concerned about their net. When they sell the house, less their payoff, less closing costs, less commissions to their agent, what number are they left with? That's called their net. If a seller, okay, in order to get in the ballpark of the net, what they walk away with, they could still very, very well be willing to pay compensation to a buyer's agent. Okay, so basically you'll put this in your contract. Okay, maybe it's an addendum, or maybe it's at the bottom of the contract in additional provisions. It's a big blank space where you say seller to pay X amount, either an exact percentage or like a flat fee amount, to go toward buyer agent commissions, buyer compensation. Okay, seller to concede X amount to pay to cover buyer agent commission. All right, so that's what you're going to put in your contracts. Okay, now is that going to weaken your offer? Sure, a little bit. But if you're still getting that seller around the net that they want, then they may very well be willing to cover that cost. Okay, and if you're looking for help with closing costs, $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 that you can use for attorney fees, for title insurance, for maybe to offset the appraisal costs or inspection costs, prorated taxes, HOA, proration, all that kind of stuff. You can still very well ask for those things in the contract, just like you always have been able to do. Okay, and in specific contracts, I'll pull up one right now. This is an Alabama Realtors contract. This is what that will look like on the actual offer itself. All of these things, if you bought a house before, you're somewhat familiar with. there's actually going to be a place in the contract where you can ask specifically for a percentage or a flat fee amount to come from the seller's payoff to go towards your buyer agent compensation. And then there, right under that, is the blank for if you want to ask for help with closing costs. That's where you do it. Okay, so don't be afraid when you're having conversations with real estate agents that you are going to have to pay 2.5% or 3% or 3.5%, whatever's negotiated with your buyer agent. Your buyer agent is going to try and help you create an offer that is an acceptable offer to the seller, but still gets them paid without you having to come out of pocket for that. Okay, so don't be scared with the changes. Don't be scared that you have to have a buyer agency agreement. Just be cognizant of who you're hiring. Make sure you're hiring an agent that can explain to you properly how this works, but can also explain how we're going to win offers, including this language. So that's basically it on the buy side. You have to have a buyer agency agreement in place before you go look at houses with an agent. You might think, well, I might get a better deal if I go straight to the listing agent. That's a great question. And I've seen, I've been the listing agent and represented a buyer on the same transaction before. I've had buyers come to me. Now here is how that's going to work, or here, let me be more specific. That's how it should work, okay? A listing agent that is hired by a seller to list the property will most likely have a single agent fiduciary duty to that seller. Okay, there's a form called RECAD where you explain single agency, okay, or transaction brokerage. That's the opposite, more or less. So that listing agent is going to have fiduciary duties most likely to that seller and that seller alone. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure. And if you come along as a buyer's agent and say, well, or as a buyer, and you say, well, I might get a better deal if I go straight to the listing agent. You might, or you might get fleeced, okay? Because again, when I'm representing a seller, my fiduciary duty is to them. I treat their money like it's my own money. If I get a buyer that comes along and wants to buy the house, I will explain to that buyer, I have fiduciary duties and loyalty to the seller. They were first. My loyalty is to them. I can represent you, but I would represent you as what's called a transaction broker, okay? Meaning I don't owe you those fiduciary duties. I can write the contract for you, I can inform you of dates and sort of the flow of the deal, but I can't share any secrets from my seller with you. But if you share secrets with me, I am going to share it with my seller. Okay, so don't tell me, well, we can't afford to pay a buyer agent commission, but we're not like, we're going to ask for it anyway in the contract. If you tell me that, I'm going to tell my seller that, because I don't owe you those fiduciary duties. So I would be representing you as a transaction broker. That is not to your advantage, okay? You might get fleeced. I would recommend you hire a buyer agent for any transaction that you do, okay? So that's just me on my soapbox there. Now let's kind of go through another couple of documents so that we can nail this down. So let me come back to a listing agreement for sellers. All right, exclusive right to sell listing. This is my company's listing agreement. Different companies have listing agreements. So again, interview multiple agents and see who's going to be the best for you. So there's where you put your name, there's a property, the period of agreement, the listing period, price and payment terms, when is it going active or is it coming soon, photographs. All right, now we get down to compensation. All right, sellers, pay attention. Listing agent meets with seller to determine a fee for the listing agent only, okay? And that fee there's some suggestions listed here, but again, it's negotiable. If you can't come to an agreement, walk away. All right, then under that is going to be, this is where your listing agent will have a conversation with you as a seller. And what they're going to tell you is, we may receive offers from buyers where the buyer is requesting assistance or concessions from you, the seller, to help pay for their buyer agent or help pay for their closing costs, okay? You do not have to necessarily agree to this, but I would encourage you to be open to the possibility that maybe it would be worth your while to entertain offers that include that. Okay, let me go to our MLS real quick. Okay, so in our MLS, where agents list property and then those properties are shot out to Zillow and Realtor.com and all that. Previous to this change, prior to this change, the agreement that was set between listing brokerage and seller, let's call it 6%, keep it easy, 3% to listing agent, 3% to buyer's agent, that's what's offered. That percentage was included here in the MLS, and agents could see what compensation was being offered to a buyer's agent in a specific percentage. Okay, so that buyer's agent knew that they were going to get paid from the seller. All right, so that's why you had a lot of buyer's agents going around saying, my services are free, my services are free. No, not exactly. They weren't exactly free. This is just what was offered from the seller and signed off on in the contract. Okay, so now that percentage is going away. Okay, so agents will not be able to see what percentage, if any, is being offered by a seller. All right. A lot of agents are freaking out about that right now, but it's better. It's better, and I'll explain why. If a seller is willing to consider concessions, let me go back to the listing agreement. Listing agent says, hey, look, there may be some buyers that can afford to pay their own agents. That's going to save you money from having to pay that. Whereas if we agreed at 6% prior to the changes, 3% to listing agent, 3% to buyer's agent, what if that buyer could have paid their own agent? That theoretically would have saved you 3% of the final sales price. That's a lot of money in a lot of cases. Okay, so that's why we're making these changes, and it's a really good thing. All right, so, but your agent should have a conversation with you and basically spell it out to you in pieces. Like, they should have a net sheet where they break down all the costs so that you'll know an estimated range of what you're gonna make when you sell your house. They should break it down to you in one estimate, which is just straight up, you're paying your own closing costs, you're paying your listing agent, and that's it. No buyer agent commission, no concession for a buyer agent commission, or no concession to go towards a buyer's closing costs. That should be your first estimate. Second estimate should be all of those regular closing costs plus, let's say 2.5% or let's say 3%, to go towards a concession from you to go to paying the buyer's agent, because you may receive offers that include that language. The buyer's asking you, the seller, for help with that, and it has to be a specific amount. And then you may want to do a third estimate, which is all your normal closing costs, 2.5%, 3%, 4%, whatever you want to put for buyer agent compensation. And then you may want to put $5,000, $7,500, $2,500 that the buyer may request from you to go towards their closing costs. Okay, so you want to have multiple estimates so that you can see how this might play out, because again, buyer's agents representing buyers for the prospective buyers for your house are not really going to know if you're willing to offer those concessions. Okay, you can tell your listing agent, when buyer's agents call you and ask, is the seller considering concessions? You can tell your listing agent, tell them yes we are, and tell them an exact amount. You're more than welcome to do that. But if I'm representing you as your listing agent, I'm not acting in your best fiduciary duty if I tell you, hey, yeah, promote that you're offering 3%. Because what if that buyer can pay for their own agent, and what if they only request 2.5%? Well, then theoretically, we've saved you 0.5%. Okay, so some agents will disagree with me on that. I don't care what other agents agree with or disagree with, because I don't work for other agents. I work for you, and I'm looking out for your best interest. All right, so that's my soapbox again. So that is more or less how this stuff is going to work. Your listing agent should explain to you that there may be offers that come in where the buyer's asking for concessions from you to go towards their buyer agent compensation. And you need to know what the differences are going to look like if and when that's requested. And you can go ahead and sign an agreement saying we are willing to compensate a buyer's agent, but just keep in mind that percentage, that amount is not going to be publicized. Okay, and we don't need to be telling buyer's agents exactly what you're willing to concede, because that gives your hand, it shows your hand right away. So again, what's really good about this change is that it's putting all the negotiating power in the buyer and the seller's hands. It's always better for the consumer. There have been dramatic changes in this industry for 130 years. Okay, and what happens is that first 6 months, agents freak out, agents say they're leaving the business, buyers and sellers kind of freak out a little bit, but ultimately when the dust settles, the consumer wins. Every time the consumer wins. All right, and so the consumer is going to win from this change. Now let me see, is there anything else? So again, there may be some contracts that include buyer broker compensation and seller compensation in the contract. Sometimes it might not be in the contract itself, but it may be in the form of an addendum to the contract. So here's a buyer broker compensation addendum. This would be attached to any offers that you get, where it says, okay, buyers are requesting a specific amount of seller concessions to go towards buyer agent compensation or to go towards closing costs. That's what that addendum would look like. There are amendments to listing agreements where it spells out what you're willing to offer as a seller. Again, I would encourage you as a seller to be open to entertaining giving concessions to a buyer to pay their agent or to pay their closing costs if that's acceptable to you. But you don't have to give an exact amount. Like if I'm representing you and a buyer's agent calls me and says, hey, are y'all buyer agent friendly? Or is the seller entertaining concessions? Or is the seller offering a commission to a buyer's agent? What I will say is the seller is considering concessions with an acceptable offer. Okay, that's how I'm going to be phrasing it. That's how I would encourage other agents to phrase it. Because if I give them that exact amount, that's just showing your hand as the seller. Yeah, so that's how that works. There's going to be, our net sheets may change a little bit. Let me just show you what the net sheet looks like as a seller. These are just going to be kind of your ballpark estimates on what the closing costs are going to be. This is going to be your attorney fee, any commission to the listing agent, if you're paying for a buyer's home warranty because they asked for it in the contract, pest inspection, property tax proration. If the seller or if the buyer asks for help with their closing costs, that's going to be here. Title insurance, and then other, it might say buyer agent compensation. And that needs to be a specific percentage, or it needs to be a flat fee amount. So what I'm going to be doing for my sellers is providing you multiple estimates based on, okay, a buyer's not requesting concessions from you to pay their agent and closing costs. That's going to be number one. Number two, they are requesting a certain amount for concessions from you to go to pay their agent. And then the third, they're requesting buyer agent compensation and closing costs. Okay, so that's going to be your estimates. And I believe that I have more or less beat that dead horse. So again, the key word here is that commissions have decoupled. Okay, so if you're selling your house and you're listing with an agent, you're going to agree to a compensation fee that's negotiable. You have to agree on it for that agent and that agent alone. Okay, buyers, you're going to have, if you want to hire a buyer's agent, you're going to have a buyer agency agreement with an agent before you cross the threshold into a house. Now, don't be afraid that you're going to have to pay that agent in addition to down payment and closing costs. If you want to request from the seller concessions from that seller to pay for that stuff, you just do it in the contract now. And then the third thing, yeah, it's just that the contracts are going to look a little bit different. So I hope that explains how compensation is going to work, move forward. Maybe that's the first time you've ever heard that. If it is, and this was educational and useful, please like the video, please subscribe, because there may be new changes that are coming if this is all kind of in flux. And so new changes may be coming, so you want to stay on top of that stuff. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you guys on the next one.